Namaste, welcome to Arthaniti. Hope you had a great weekend. Now we are just 2 days away from the budget. On the 1st of February, Nirmala Sitaraman would be presenting the budget in the parliament. Uh, Many of us, yeah, even though we are from a finance background, or even if we are from a non finance background, pay very little attention to this very important event that takes place every year on the 1st of February. Most of us are limited in our interest about the budget only specifically to the taxation rules. Yeah, are the taxation rules changed in our favor so that the disposable income in our hands increases? Yeah, that is the limit up to which we are interested in the union budget. But budget is a very very important event. Why? Because it not only affects our income levels, but it also gives you a fair idea about what to expect from the various sectors in industrial sectors, and where there is potential to invest your money and benefit from it. So overlooking the budget or ignoring the budget is not the right way to make your investment decisions. Well, in this video we will simplify the budget. The aim of me starting this channel was financial literacy. Correct? Why? Because if we are informed, we make better decisions, right? So besides taxation, there are a few more areas which are very very important to be known by all investors, all individuals, which may affect their investment decisions. Correct? But before we go on to dwell in those areas, first let us understand what a budget means. Do you know what a budget is? Well, it is not an exercise which is carried on to check what has happened in the past, in the sense what incomes and expenditure the government has undertaken in the year gone by. It is not that exercise. It is an exercise to plan for the future. Okay, so basically, a budget is a plan where the government lays down a blueprint of all the incomes that it expects to generate from the various sources, and all the expenditures where it intends to spend the money in the country for the next financial year. Correct? So the union budget that is presented is for one financial year. Correct? The financial year begins when? From the 1st of April and ends on 31st of March next year. A budget is basically divided into two categories: capital budget and revenue budget. Okay, now what is a revenue budget? Well, it pertains to the revenue, income, and expenditure that the government undertakes. Now, what forms part of the revenue generation of the government? Well, taxes, non taxable income, grants that the government receives are all part of the revenues that the government receives. And what are revenue expenses? Well, revenue expenses or revenue spendings are further subdivided into planned and non-planned spendings. Now, what are planned spendings? Planned spendings are where in the budget specific provisions have been made that so and so amount will be spent on various schemes, say maybe related to agriculture, education, healthcare, um, supply of food and food stuff. Correct? So all these are planned revenue expenses. Non-planned revenue expenses basically are obligatory expenses of the government. What are obligatory expenses? Say the salaries that it pays to government employees, the pensions that are paid to retired government employees, all form part of non-planned obligatory revenue expenditures. The second part of the budget is the capital budget. Now, capital revenues relate to loans or divestment proceeds that the government receives from divesting various public sector undertakings. Well, LIC divestment has been on the cards, which did not happen in the previous financial year but is expected to happen next year. Some stake in the government owned BPCL is Bharat Petroleum, correct, is also expected to be divested. So any revenue that, any income that the government receives from these sources form part of the capital income. Correct? Now, what are capital expenses? Capital expenses are the ones which creates long term assets. So say infrastructural development that is carried on in the country, the building of roads, other transportation means, metros, or advancement in telecommunications are all part of capital expenses. So the budget is basically divided into revenue budget and capital budget. See, it is important to understand this. Why? Because any infrastructural boost that the budget makes provisions for will have a positive impact on the economy. Correct? With advancement in the infrastructural facilities, more and more industries are attracted into the country, which generate more and more subsidiary industries as well as jobs and incomes of the people. Correct? So any provisions related to infrastructural boost is a good welcome sign for investors. Likewise, taxation, as I have told you, which is a source of revenue income for the government, again is a very very important point that individuals or retail investors should not overlook. Now, we'll ponder upon five very, very important areas that you need to look out when you study the budget. Because there are reams and reams of papers that are written about what the budget speech said, the various aspects in which the government is going to undertake expenditures and where it is going to generate income. Correct? But it becomes a very tedious part to go through such long material. So let us focus on five basic aspects which you cannot overlook when you are studying the budget. Now, the first aspect is that of taxation. Taxation relates to income tax or goods and services tax, which impact our spending as well as the income that is left in our hands. Correct? Capital gains is again one area which impacts how we earn our money. Correct? So there are possibilities that some changes in the long term capital gains tax structures would come in, and look out for that when you read about the budget or when you hear Mrs. Sitaraman speaking in the parliament about taxation. So that is the first aspect that you should be looking at when you study the union budget. The second aspect that you should not overlook is the infrastructural spending. Now, one internal report of the finance ministry stated that every 1 rupee, yeah, that was spent on, say, a scheme like a direct benefit transfer scheme, generates 90 paise of economic development. Okay, you understood? 1 rupee spent on a scheme like, say, a direct benefit, direct to the bank transfer scheme generates 90 paise of economic advancement in the country. While every 1 rupee that is spent on infrastructural development generates 3 rupees of additional growth in the gross domestic product. So you can make out the immense impact that infrastructural development has on boosting the economy of the country. You understood what I said? A report in an internal report in the finance ministry stated that 1 rupee which was spent by the government on various schemes like direct to bank transfer, correct, say education or to farmers, all such money that is spent, every 1 rupee that is spent in direct to bank transfer schemes generates 90 paise of economic growth. Whereas if the government is spending 1 rupee on infrastructural development, then it generates a triple benefit vis-a-vis the GDP of the country. So the impact is huge. Look out for what the government is planning to do in the infrastructural pace. Correct? We already know the pace at which roads are getting built, the metro works that are in full swing all over the country. Yeah, the golden quadrilateral that is being constructed in the four corners of India. Correct? Then maritime transport, again airports which are coming up in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. All this is going to boost the economy threefold times as per this internal report. So look out for any infra spendings or infra boost that the budget will speak on in on the 1st of February. The third sector that should be looked out for is the agricultural sector. Well, it is the backbone of our economy. With like having one of the world's largest population, agriculture has to be on a strong footing. Correct. There are going to be various provisions to boost agricultural or crop production, supply chain management of crops from the field to the plate of the consumers. Correct, is going to have a major what do we say, a major mention in this budget. Like all budgets, agriculture will be one of the significant part of this year's budget too. One thing that people are saying and might not happen in this budget, but which is a very sticky point, is whether income tax should be introduced to farmers in the ultra rich category. All of us know that agricultural income till date is not taxed in our country. Is the government planning to introduce such tax in the case of ultra rich farmers? Well, looks like a distant possibility with the general elections approaching next year in 2024. But look out for any such provisions. Divestment is the fourth category, which is a very important category from an investment point of view. In the last budget, the government had made provisions for a 65,000 crore rupees worth of divestment plans, whereas the target achieved was only 32,000 crores. Correct? So nearly half of what was budgeted was achieved in the previous financial year. So the government can be more aggressive when it comes to divestment in this year's budget per se. Correct. LIC and BPCL, like I said before, are the divestments in these two companies are in the pipeline, and the government, obviously, for all the infrastructural spending that it has its targets set for, will need any added revenue to be generated from divestment sources as well. So divestment also is going to be one of the most important parts of this year's budget. Correct. Last but not the least, pay attention to fiscal deficit. Now, what is fiscal deficit? Well, it is the difference between the income and expenditure of the government. Now, what happens is when the government is spending more than what it is earning, the budget is said to be in a fiscal deficit. Now the target for last year, which was set in last year's budget, was 6.4% of the GDP. So we are a fiscal deficit country, wherein our expenditures are more than the income that the government generates. Correct. So the last year target was to manage the fiscal deficit to somewhere around 6.4% of the GDP. It is said that the target has been met, and more than enough. Correct. So instead of 6.4, which was targeted in previous year's budget, the figure that is being talked about is 5.9. So already we have generated more income than we had targeted in the previous year's budget. Correct. So this year it is expected that the new GDP target, that I'm sorry, the new trade deficit target that the budget will suggest is around 5.4 to 5.5% of GDP. Now, you should know that this increased levels are due to the COVID lockdowns and the various government schemes that were followed during the COVID lockdowns. Correct. Prior to COVID, we had a budgetary deficit of around 3.5% of GDP. So these increased levels are due to the onset of the COVID pandemic, and gradually these levels will go down to the pre-COVID uh, stats, correct? So this is again also a very important point, a very important factor that you should look out for. Why? Because a high fiscal deficit obviously increases inflation, it caps government spending, and it can lead to devaluation of the currency as well, which is not a good sign from an investor's point of view. So always a lower fiscal deficit, which has been achieved in this in the previous budget, is a welcome sign for retail investors. So look out for these five factors. Which one? Just to sum up everything, the first is taxation, then the second is infrastructural spending, third is agriculture, then divestment decisions, and fifth, not the least, is fiscal deficit. Correct? So check out the budget, read about them, and you will have a fair idea of how the government intends to earn and spend the money. After all, if the economy is on the roll, it is going to affect, it is going to positively impact our investments and our earning capacities as individuals. So correct. So paying attention to budget is very, very important, and read about it. I will put forth a video after the budget speech and explain about these five factors that I have told to you about in today's video. See you till the next video. Be safe. Thank you.